So I'm going to copy that. Go over here. Let's make another sim thing here. I'm going to call it, I guess this should have always been a purple thing. I don't know why I made it green. Doesn't really matter, of course. Let's make this one be sim spray refine. So sim spray refine is going to start off by bringing in that thing we just made. So I can paste that in there, and there you go. So we have a nice collider for our particles. So what else do we need? We need to actually get the spray itself. So back over here, we can copy this, paste it in there. So the naive approach would just be to spawn particles, a new particle from everything on here. As usual though, we can specify kind of criteria for this. I'd also say we're going to not rely on this attribute randomize, so let's just cut it out of there and move it over here. We want to do this at the end. So anyway, we'll start from here and we'll say, let's come up with a criteria to say where the particle should be spawned. So let's just use, kind of like what we did before, we'll use speed. So if the length of the velocity, we should be used to that by now, if the length of the velocity is less than some threshold that we're gonna come up with now, so just thresh, then delete the point. Many ways we could do this. We could actually use like a fitted range to have it maybe ramp in or something, but I think this will probably be good enough. So I'm gonna say, let's just target like the most intense areas here. So these will be the areas that spawn new particles. Let's drop a pop net down, which is of course actually just a DOP network. Jump inside here. The kind of sourcing we want to do is not scatter on the surface. We want to just get the points that we just came up with. So all points should be good. Let's have the particles not necessarily live forever, as though the particle might be getting smaller in the air as maybe even smaller particulates come off of it. So I'm just going to say it can live a second plus or minus a half a second. Let's also add a little bit to the velocity. It should inherit the velocity for sure, but then we'll do 0.1 on each. Just vary it a little bit. Like I want these to stay as clusters, so I don't want to add too much variation, but just a little bit should be good. Of course it needs gravity, and it's definitely going to need to collide with the thing that we made. So I'm not even sure why I brought this one in here like that. Let's just copy that, go over here. We can say, or let's just bring it up over here. Let's go find our collision setup, because we want to get the poly one also. The poly one again goes into the SOP path. It is a deforming geometry. The volume collisions will be the volume sample, and then the proxy volume will be here. I think I did poly both. It should be poly all. Great. Now here's an interesting thing. Normally when a particle collides with the collider, it bounces off of it. So turn on add hit attributes and change the response to die. We want these particles to die when they touch the boat. It'll be as though, or the ocean for that matter, they're just rejoining either with the ocean or they are sticking to the boat or whatever, and we're just not going to see them anymore. We don't need them to do anything more clever than that. And then of course we need to actually merge that in so that it happens. Great. Turn off the sim thing here. So let's see what that looks like. We should also say we only want to import the actual pop object itself. We don't want to import the collider from this. So if I run a few frames, we can see that it's working. It's doing a thing. So that's cool. We can also go grab the wind, because this will be kind of subject to the same idea as our whitewater. So go into the whitewater, steal the pop wind out of that, and we'll just merge it in here. We'll just put it, there we go, weird. So just hook it into that. Although we'll just say this is all spray, so we'll just turn this group thing off. It should all be affected by this. Very cool. We want to get a cacher. So go grab your favorite caching thing. I'm going to get this whitewater one here. We mostly just want to make sure that we're not doing the load as packed disk primitive here, because we are going to have to modify the sizes after it. So file cache mist refine. And while we're on a roll, let's go up here to the whitewater, paste this one here. This will be fetch mist refine. And we'll make sure we do this right this time. Good. Like so. Now, we may have to reassess how these are organized later on, but this is probably mostly right. We'll review that in a minute. But for now, all I really need you to do is let's run that refine and let's see what the result of that looks like. Okay, so that's done. So it seems like it probably worked. Let's visualize by age. Turn it on. Sometimes if you click that visualize thing and the actual visualize thing here is not on, it won't work. Let's change the age to not be auto. I'm going to do min and max. 0 to 1 should be good. I guess 0 to, what was the average? I had it set to 1 plus or minus 5, so I'll just say 1. That's fine. Okay, let's see what this looks like. There you are. So it worked well. We can see the pop wind kind of thing working. We can see these kind of streams of particle trails, which is what I wanted by not making the variant velocity that we added to it be too high. But there's just also way more particles in general. Like, let's say by the time we're at the end here, this is now 1 million particles, whereas we came in here with 1.3 million particles kind of everywhere. But now we have 1 million particles just concentrated in the areas that we want. I'm seeing both right now. Another viewport bug. Why not? Anyway, that's fine. Let's take these. Let's take the initial spray ones that we have here. There we go. Back to normal. Let's not get rid of these entirely. Like, I don't want to just have particles in the front. I'm going to have to destroy the scene view again and make it again. 1 second. Okay. So the way I have it working right now is that I just have my new particles here. So I'm missing out on everything that I used to have elsewhere, including even in the initial kind of like fan area here. So what I'm trying to say is, let's combine forces. Let's take this, but maybe not all of this, because this clearly isn't the kind of spray that we're talking about. Let's take this and say, maybe when the spray is greater than 0 is the spray, but what about when the spray is greater than 0.1? We knock out almost all that extra garbage back there. So I'm going to say that combined with this can be our end result. Best of both worlds. Nice. So this should pass through our sizes that we kind of liked. I think the sizes we saw for the bubbles and the spray before was pretty good. Let's tweak it, but let's start there. So out on that. This should be what the render spray points to now. We don't want it to point to the one that comes right out of the whitewater anymore. Cool. So let's see. Let's go to our favorite frame, 72. This is what we just had a moment ago. Let's see what this looks like now. So you can see the difference. We have a lot more of it now. It's more fuzzy. Let's actually go to the last frame and see what that looks like, because there's going to be a lot more of it to more properly judge. And there it is. So we can see the cool tendrils and whatnot that I like to see. Now, we do have some variation in the size from 0.8 to 1.2. It would be nice, we could get some really nice texture in here if we really push, if we push this, we say a very few amount of particles are very large, but most of them are about the size that we already came up with. So go to custom ramp, and let's make kind of a classic ramp where we go all the way up to 0.9, which is going to be half the value, and at half the position here, we're at that. So it's just kind of a steep curve. I'll change these to monotone cubics if they're not already. I guess they already are. Now these values still need to be remapped. I'm going to say 0.75 now for the smallest, which is more or less where we had before, 0.85. And the biggest though, some of them at the very end should be very big at 4. So let's make sure I have this one saved. And let's render this again. And we should see a lot more kind of a little bit more of a crunchy texture to it. So that's interesting. It's a bit thick though, like we have this solid wall of mist now. Let's try taking this down quite a bit here and rendering that. All right, well, it's a little better. There's a little bit less now, but it's still pretty intense. I'm gonna take this and move this up to 0.75. Let's concentrate the bigger particles more up on the end. Okay. So it's definitely less now. Again, if we look at the alpha, there's still a big solid area here. When we render this, we're gonna talk about mats and things, where a mat is some other object that is kind of subtracted from this. So for example, I can't just plop this down on top of an image of the boat, you know, or else if the boat's supposed to sit here, then all of this will be plopped on top of the boat. That won't work. So what we'll have to do is we're going to carve out areas where it is intersecting with other objects. So it might be worthwhile to do that now. I'm going to say, let's go back over to the out area here. And if we have our spray, let's do that. Let's take the spray and in the matte, let's put the splash exterior, and we'll also put in the boat. Let's change this to let's do that to the spray. And let's see if maybe when we remove some of those things, it might thin it out a little bit. I mean, ultimately we won't really know for sure what this is gonna look like until we add to the comp. So this is probably already pretty good now. We could also just randomly delete particles out of this based on their ID, which again, we might do, we'll see. But I think we've probably gotten this far enough that we can do our last simulation, which is going to be the mist. But let's just see what this looks like first. We can talk about it. So you can see we went from this to this. You can see, like I said, there's chunks carved out of it, because this is where the actual flip liquid sim lives. You can also see the boat now over here, and also, again, the liquid sim in there. Cool. All right, so again, this is probably pretty good. There are these thick areas, but I don't know. We'll see. If it is a problem, we'll come back to it.